Hi there, I'm Damian Little. Thank you for joining me for Little Did You Know Travel, and welcome to this episode where we're going to talk about things to do before you embark on an international trip. Some of these things I've done for years, but now post-COVID, there's some new things that you need to keep in mind before you jump on an aircraft and travel the globe. We're going to talk about the top 10 things to do before you embark. All of that's coming up on this episode of Little Did You Know Travel. So let's do this. The top 10 things to do before you depart on an international trip. Number 10, health and safety. Now, health and safety, even before COVID, was very important to me when I traveled internationally. And really, it should be to you. There's a couple tips I'll give you. Number 1, once you book your hotel, look for medical care in the area of your hotel. Know where the nearest hospital is, but also look for potentially like an urgent care facility. Check which your US-based insurance will cover you while you're traveling overseas. It's much better to have that information before something happens and hope you never need it. The other thing is safety. Now, it depends what country you're from. There's probably, if you're in a big city, an embassy or a consulate from your country. It's also not a bad idea to know where that's located, just in case, God forbid, you lose your passport, or something happens in that country and you need to get to the embassy or consulate. The other thing with safety is know what's going on in your country that you're visiting, especially a major city. There's certain days of the year where there might be historical data that says this happens on this day every year, and that could be during your trip. Or there could be civil unrest occurring and you might not know about it. Because in a lot of countries, it is a local issue and it doesn't get the world press. So always do your homework before you travel. I have a great example. Years ago, I went to Warsaw, Poland on November 11th. I went there on November 11th because I didn't have to work. It was a federal U.S. holiday, Veterans Day. But it was also a Polish holiday. It's Poland's Independence Day. Now, the middle of the city center was filled with amazingly cool things to see. A military parade, people waving flags. It was awesome. I'm glad I was there on that holiday. But one thing I didn't know, on that evening, there was historically protesting. And some of that protesting got a little bit exciting. A little bit of throwing of stuff and little chaos in the streets. Prepare yourselves for crazy things like that. Now, in the post-COVID world, you have another layer of health and safety to worry about, and that's COVID rules. And boy, they vary country to country, and at times even city to city, airline to airline, and hotel to hotel. Some countries do have vaccine requirements, much less of that in this current time. But like, for example, traveling overseas and returning to the United States, you must test before you arrive into the U.S. The current rules say 1 day prior to departing. When it comes to COVID tests, there's a couple different options you can do to return to the United States. Some of them can be quite expensive overseas, like a PCR test at an airport. And they kind of have to be a quick turnaround because you need those test results within 1 day. One solution is a test like this, a COVID home test. Now, these are different than these type of tests, which are called self-tests. These guys, you get at your local drugstore, get them at the mail to you, and you take on your own, but there's nothing official with these. Unlike these, that when you take them, you have a QR code, you scan it, and you take it online with someone watching you take the test. After your test is complete, they will provide you, as depicted here, with a vaccine certificate that is usable, at least in the current times, to enter in the United States. So again, this is the most popular one, an Abbott COVID-19 home test. Most of these are only available online. I got a pack of 3. They cost me $100 for 3 tests. However, in some European cities, from my research, you can have a PCR test cost well above $100 each. Number 9, keep an eye on those itineraries, because from the moment you book your trip to the day you take off, you might be hit with what is called a schedule change. In most cases, you will be notified. But I have had multiple times where I was not notified of a schedule change. So I check my itinerary weekly. Every Sunday, I look at my itineraries to make sure they're still intact. And you might be thinking, well, I have a confirmed reservation. What could happen? Well, actually a lot. And more so after COVID. An airline schedules out for about a year. And they will adjust their schedule based off of demand, based off of available aircraft, world events, pandemics. All of these things can affect the flight actually being offered. So a good example of a minor schedule change is your original flight was scheduled to take off at 8:30 a.m. and now it takes off at 9:15 a.m. Okay, not a big deal unless you have a connection flight. Because when you connect at an airport, the airport you connect in has something called a minimal connection time. Meaning there's an amount of time officially stated by that airport, and all the airlines agreed to it, that if your connection is less than, let's use an hour or 60 minutes as an example, your connection is now what is termed as illegal, meaning you need to fix that. Because the airlines know that there's no way you're going to make that connection. You might have to clear immigration, another round of security, or the airport is so large that you might have to transfer to different terminals. So always keep an eye on those connection times. When I book a flight, as much as I hate sitting in airports, I try to stick with about a 2-hour connection as close as possible. If it's a tight connection, I'm going to look for alternative options because I don't want to be rushing and stressed when I travel. So the same thing goes for a schedule change. If the airline reaccommodates you and it's a little tighter than you want, it cannot hurt to reach out. Now, if it's a minor schedule change, the airline really doesn't have to do much. But if it's a major schedule change, like for example, you booked a direct flight from point A to point B, but the airline decided not to offer that anymore, so they're requiring you to connect to get there, and they're making you go to some crazy connection. It might be worth calling up and seeing if there's a better option. Because in most cases, the airline's computer is making this decision, and they're just hoping that you take it because it's the least cost impact to the airline. So be your own best advocate. Keep an eye on those itineraries. I have had complete flights just vanish and I wasn't reaccommodated. You normally see that on an itinerary that you book through a third party, like an Expedia, a Booking.com, or a travel agent. You may also find that when you book a flight through your airline, but you're connecting to a partner airline, and that partner airline made a change and does not offer that flight anymore, and it just kind of vanished. So do keep a close eye on all your itineraries from the time you book it to the time you travel. Number 8, don't spend money spending your money. A lot of credit cards have a thing called an international foreign transaction fee, meaning when you make a charge in a foreign currency, your bank is going to charge you a fee. You want to make sure one of the credit cards you have and the card you use has no international transaction fees. A lot of the travel-related credit cards have this perk, but do double check before you go. Another thing, make sure the country you're going to actually accepts credit cards, because there's a lot of countries in the world that when you're out and about, using a credit card might be a challenge. The other thing to keep in mind and do some research on is how can you get cash in a foreign country? In all likelihood, the worst place is at one of those airport exchange kiosk things. They're going to hit you with fees and also give you a horrible exchange rate. What I normally do is use an ATM card in the country I'm in at a local bank's ATM. Again, use caution when using an ATM in a foreign country. The best is find a bank, but do check for those typical things you should check at any ATM. Make sure there's no skimmer on it and check your surroundings. But if you have a good bank, they won't charge you any fees for using an international bank's ATM machine. But check first. For example, my bank gives me 10 out-of-network ATMs a month with no fee, and they also don't charge me any exchange fee. And the rate I'm going to get when I use my ATM card is the international bank rate. In my experience, this is always the best rate that you're going to get when converting money. Number 7, book any tours ahead of time. In this day and age, companies want you to book in advance. And you have the benefit of searching the internet, looking at reviews, getting other people's feedback, and finding the best tour that meets your travel style. It might be a private tour, it might be a hop-on, hop-off bus, all of which might have better pricing if you book in advance. So definitely don't wait till the last minute. Check out prices online and go ahead and book in advance. Number 6, email your hotel or accommodation ahead of time. Ask questions and potentially book airport transfers. Here's the deal. You may not know everything about the place you're going. And sure, you can Google it and find out information. But the people who work at a hotel, or if you're staying at like a B&B or something like that, they have a passion with telling people about their city. Learn from them. Get information. If you're staying in a hotel and have status, ask for an upgrade in advance. I have about a 75% success rate in doing so. One thing I really would suggest, and this is for major city hotels in Europe and in Asia, ask the hotel about getting from the airport to the hotel. Here's an example. For my trip, I'm staying in Prague, Czech Republic. I'm staying in the Old Town. I don't need a car in Prague. I just need to get from the airport to the hotel. I reached out to the hotel asking if they offered a transfer service. They said yes. It's going to cost me $35 to get from the airport to the hotel in a Mercedes with a private driver who's going to be outside baggage claim with a sign. The average cost of a taxi in Prague to get from the airport to the city center is between $30 and $40. And at times, public transportation might be the best option. Hotels and B&Bs are going to give you great detail on how to best get from the baggage claim to the public transportation and what stop and what train number, etc. to use. So there's less for you to research. Allow them to give you the local expertise. Number 5, make sure you have the right travel tech gear. So in the United States, we have power at 110 volts. That's the amount of juice that comes out of the wall sockets. In most of the rest of the world, it's double at 220 volts. So you want to make sure what you're plugging into a hotel in a foreign country doesn't blow up whatever you're trying to charge up. So let's talk about that first. Most of your cell phone chargers, laptop stuff have a lot of words on it. And what you want to look for, like on this one, for example, it says 100 to 240 volts, meaning that this thing can take anywhere from 100 volts up to 240 volts and still output a safe thing for your electronic device. So that's great and dandy, but these plugs don't fit all around the world. So you need to get something called an adapter, like this. Just pop it on, changes it to the European end there, and you can plug it in. Now that's a standard adapter. If you have a laptop that you're traveling with and that charger has the 3 prongs, like a plug like that, there's more expensive adapters that are grounded. That's what that extra hole's for. And if you get one like this, these are the grounding for most of Europe, and then some European countries actually have an outie of their plug, and you have this rod that goes into this hole. I don't know why I said rod, but that's what it looks like. That's an adapter. There's also like universal ones you can buy. They're a lot bigger. Just note that every country might have different plugs. Most of Europe are plugs similar to this, and the UK has very large plugs. So do your research to make sure you buy the right adapters, and also check your electronics to make sure they work. A lot of things that aren't dual voltage, like this adapter, is curling irons and hair dryers and stuff like that. So be very careful when using these adapters. Always make sure it can handle the amount of voltage that is going to be given to it out of the wall socket. The other thing to think about is a portable battery pack. This one, for example, is from a company called Mophie. I'll put a link down in the description, but it's got a built-in cable. I just have to plug my phone into it. I like to have this on a day out. If I'm using my phone for photos and for GPS, I want to make sure I have a way to charge my phone, because all of those things can kill your battery pretty quickly. So a portable battery pack is good for that, and also potentially on a long flight. Check with your airline before you fly. Look on their website, find out what type of aircraft you're flying on, and see if you're going to have a plug at your seat. If you plan on using your device on an 8-hour flight, a portable battery pack might be a good idea. But check the airline's websites to see if you will have a plug at your seat. One last thing I do like is a simple thing from Amazon again. It's like a case that you can put chargers and wires in and it zips up. I like to have this to have everything organized in one spot. I'll put I'll put a link in the description for some of these things. So do your research on power adapters and make sure you're going to be charged up when you're on vacation. Number 4, stay connected when you travel. So cell phones are a part of our everyday life. And where you're traveling, your cell phone might or might not work, and it could potentially cost you a fortune. So definitely reach out to your cell phone provider and investigate your options for international coverage. A lot of companies have different rules, and some of their marketing is a bit deceptive. I'm not going to name the company, but one company claims that you can use your phone basically anywhere in the world with unlimited data. Yeah, the data is not unlimited, but the speeds you get are quite slow, sometimes at really ridiculously slow speeds where you won't be able to open an email or even send a photo. So read the fine print when you do it. Some other companies have a daily charge, like $10 a day, where you can use your phone like you're in the US in a foreign country, but $10 a day can really get expensive over time. One thing I would recommend is Google Fi. Now, you can get a temporary number for when you travel. The way Google Fi works is if you get their more expensive unlimited plan, you will get unlimited data up to a threshold of gigabytes. That will work in most countries in the world. Making phone calls are another story. Text messaging is free, but phone calls do have a low minute cost unless you use Wi-Fi calling. Google is constantly changing these plans, but I have found Google Fi to be a pretty reliable option when traveling overseas. Your other option is if you're staying in one particular country, get a local SIM card when you arrive. Most foreign airports do have some type of SIM card or phone company in the airport, normally after baggage claim. You can get a prepaid SIM card, pop it in. The downfall to that is you will get a foreign phone number, so if someone wanted to reach you, they would have to use some type of voice over IP, like WhatsApp, maybe contact you on Facebook Messenger, etc. Google Fi will give you a US number. You could port your number over to it, your normal number, but I think that would be too much work for a temporary situation. But do look at Google Fi as an option for staying connected for longer trips overseas. Number 3, constantly keep an eye on your hotel's rates even after you booked. First off, when you're booking a hotel, if it's far out, I would always book a flexible rate, meaning there's no penalty to cancel your hotel room. Sometimes you are intrigued to have some really good deals if you prepay in advance, so use your best judgment on that. Normally what I do is I will book a flexible or a semi-flexible rate at a hotel. And just like I check for airline schedule changes, I will look and try to rebook that same hotel up until the time I'm getting ready to travel to see if the rate has dropped. Now this is for cash rates or even if you're using like a hotel program's points. For example, in my trip that I'm on right now, I booked a hotel originally, it was 50,000 Hilton points. I had a gut feeling that was a little high. I rebooked it 4 times and now the same room is only 24,000 points. That is an over a half off just by keeping my eye on that rate. No one's going to reach out to you and say, hey, your rate dropped. So just because you think it's a good deal, always keep an eye on it. Unfortunately, in our current economic environment and the way travel is a little wonky right now, they're not necessarily gone down, but definitely keep an eye on it. In my experience, hotel rates are at their sweet spot, meaning better for you, at that 6 to 4 month out window. So that's just a tip on when the best time to book or check up on that rate. Do it weekly like me, and you might be surprised one week. Number 2, sign up for Global Entry. Global Entry is through the United States government where you can sign up to have a fast track through immigration when you return to the United States. This will only be beneficial to someone who plans on traveling internationally a lot. There is a cost to sign up for this, and currently there is a long backlog of requests. There's reports of it taking 4 to 6 months to complete. So if you plan on traveling a lot, you might want to get started on this. Also check with a credit card you might have. A lot of travel credit cards like the American Express Platinum card, for example, and a few cards from Chase do offer a refund when you get Global Entry and use that particular credit card. They cover that fee for you. So do check for that. Number 1, and the most important, check your passport. See when your passport expires. With COVID, a lot of people have forgotten that their passport expires. Look at that date. Make sure it's not going to expire by the time you take your trip. And in all honesty, make sure it doesn't expire 6 months from the day you were planning on arriving in a country. A lot of countries around the world require your passport to be valid for an additional 6 months after the day you arrive for a U.S. passport holder. So you need to make sure your passport doesn't expire 2 or 3 months out of when you plan on doing a trip. Make sure it's valid for at least 6 months out. Renewing your passport does have a backlog currently, and signing up for a new passport also has a backlog. So if you plan on traveling, check that date. If you never had a passport, sign up and get your passport rolling and get that process started.
Thanks for watching this episode of Little Did You Know Travel. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit that bell for updates.